So if you have heartburn, indigestion, GERD, you're going to be very happy you watched this video. I mean, we all know what acid reflux and heartburn really is. It's too much acid, right? Is there a difference between acid reflux, heartburn, and the overproduction of acid? There's a huge difference, okay? When you have heartburn or acid reflux or GERD, where do you actually feel it? Do you feel it in the stomach? Usually not, unless you have an ulcer. Normally, you feel it just above the stomach in the esophagus or even in the larynx as it can come up the esophagus into your throat. And so, what you're going to soon learn is that heartburn, GERD, acid reflux is actually the opposite problem. It's usually not an overproduction of acid, it's an underproduction of acid. And I'm going to prove it. So, let's go through this. I mean, I would bet you anything, if you go to your doctor with heartburn or acid reflux, they're not going to test the pH of your stomach. Okay. They're not going to check your acids. They're not going to look at that because it's obvious that you have too much acid. But here's the problem. When you don't have enough acid, the valve on the top of the stomach doesn't necessarily close tightly enough. And the acid can then regurgitate up into the esophagus, making you think that you have too much acid, when in fact, you have just acid in the wrong place. It's a well-known fact that people develop GERD as they get older. You don't normally have this problem when you're younger. Well, with an exception of myself, in my 20s, I had this because I had really bad digestive issues. But that was more of an ulcer, okay, which actually also had some acid reflux. But normally speaking, as you age, okay, over 40, 50 years old, a lot more people get acid reflux. But it's also true that as we age, we lose our stomach acid. The acidity in our stomach becomes less and less and less as we age. So that's kind of conflicting. It doesn't make sense unless you really understand that normally the root cause of acid reflux, heartburn, GERD is a lack of acid. Even if you take a look at what is normal, a normal pH of your hydrochloric acid in your stomach should be between 1 and 3. Now, what does that mean? Well, it is the strongest acid in the entire body. In fact, it's between 100,000 to 1,000,000 times more acid than your blood. Your acid is like battery acid, and that is normal because the function of that acid is to help you break down protein, to turn that like beef steak that you eat into like a soup. And so that's what the acid does. It helps to unravel the protein. So then the enzymes that are released from this strong acid can break down easier. So we can then go from a protein to eventually amino acids. Amino acids are like the building block of proteins. And so every time you eat this long chain of amino acids, protein, your body has to break them all the way down into the small parts. So it can then take those small parts, amino acids, and then build back up body tissues. But let me just kind of refocus on what we're talking about. We're talking about GERD, acid reflux, acid indigestion, heartburn, being caused by a weakened acid or a stomach pH that's no longer between 1 and 3. It's starting to go higher. As the numbers go higher, things become less acidic. So there are two main conditions of low stomach acids, okay? One is called hypochlorhydria. That just means low acids. So instead of being between 1 and 3, it's like between 3 and 5. Then you have another condition called achlorhydria, okay? That means you don't have any more acids. But that's not 100% true because the definition of achlorhydria means a pH of greater than 5 in men and a pH of greater than 6 in women. But realize that if you're 5 or 6, that's still below 7, which is neutral. So there's still some acid in your stomach. Now, if you just search this, just take a look at the symptoms of both of these conditions, okay? And you're going to find some very interesting things. Both of those conditions produce GERD, acid reflux, heartburn, bloating, and all the other symptoms that occur when you don't have enough hydrochloric acid in your system. Hydrochloric acid is there to help you break down food, especially protein, help you absorb minerals and vitamins, especially calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, and also vitamins too. Vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C. That hydrochloric acid is there to help wipe out pathogens and microbes that are trying to get through to the stomach level and to the rest of the body. So with the right pH, you can kill off the microbes so you don't end up with an infection or a pathogen. And so if you don't have enough acid, you can become anemic because you can't absorb iron as well as B12. You can start getting a stomach infection and even an infection in your small intestine where there's too many microbes, and that's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And because you're not breaking down proteins, your immune system's going to react a little bit weird, and you're going to develop food allergies and even autoimmune diseases. Without that acid being really strong in your stomach, you're also at risk of developing cancer in your stomach. You're also at risk of developing H. pylori, which is this microbe normally in your stomach, doesn't create any problem until the pH becomes too alkaline. I mean, even the strategy of this H. pylori is to increase ammonia, which is very alkaline, so it can then survive. And so H. pylori comes out of remission when your pH isn't acid enough, and also that infection creates an alkaline stomach. And if you're not getting the minerals and you're not getting the protein, you're also at risk for osteoporosis. So if you don't have enough acid in your stomach, you're going to feel it as indigestion, bloating, and gas especially. Now, what is mind-blowing to me is if you look up these two medical conditions, the treatment is not to add back the acid. In fact, it's everything but that. It's kind of like there is no specific treatment. I'll look up to see if there's a genetic problem, cancer, and treat that. Look to see if there's anemia and treat that. Look to see if there's H. pylori and treat that. But there is no medical recommendation for increasing the acid from both of these conditions, which are a loss of acid. Now, if we take a look at some of the major side effects of antacids or PPIs, or basically, generally speaking, acid-suppressing medication, one of the main side effects is a loss of stomach acid. If you treat a loss of stomach acid with something that's going to cause a loss of stomach acid, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get worse, but you're going to feel better temporarily when you eat because you have all this acid that's regurgitating into the esophagus. If we can keep that down, you feel better, but you'll be having all these other issues, right? And people that are on chronic medications to suppress stomach acids have a lot of issues. And this could be completely avoided if someone tested the pH in their stomach instead of just assuming they had a problem with the overproduction of this acid. So I'm going to show you a very simple, inexpensive way, okay, that doesn't involve an expensive test to determine if you have low stomach acids. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that, but I just want to explain a little bit more on this HCl, hydrochloric acid first. How does someone end up with lowered amount of hydrochloric acid? If someone has hypothyroidism, that can produce a loss of stomach acid. If someone doesn't eat healthily, they can develop H. pylori infection, or let's say their immune system is suppressed. That can actually pop up, come out of remission, and create an alkaline environment and cause you to lose your stomach acids just from that. And of course, we already talked about taking antacids or other medications that can diminish your acid as well. And you can even develop low hydrochloric acid from being on a low salt diet, from having a potassium deficiency, from having a zinc deficiency, and even from having an iodine deficiency. There's another reason why you might also have a loss of hydrochloric acid. It's because you eat too frequently. Just think about the digestive system. Our bodies were not designed to eat every hour and a half with 3 meals and snacks in between. As we do that over time, we're basically just depleting the digestive juices. We're weakening the system to the point where we don't ever have a chance for our digestive system to rest in between eating. It's kind of like exercising constantly and never giving your body a chance to recover. And then all the insulin that could create a diabetic situation. And by the way, diabetics are 4 times more likely to develop GERD than people who are not diabetics. So the number one remedy to resolve this problem is betaine hydrochloride. You can get it over the counter. It's not a medication. It's a natural remedy. And the only time you wouldn't want to take it is if you had an ulcer And so this is how I'm going to recommend that you take betaine hydrochloride starting out, okay? Because, if you had chronic heartburn for a long period of time or acid reflux, you could develop an ulcer. And so if you took this betaine hydrochloride, which is kind of like a building block for acids, it can aggravate the ulcer. So this is how I would recommend taking it. First of all, when you start eating, right when you get the first bite of food into your stomach, then take the betaine hydrochloride, because I don't want you to take it on an empty stomach and then maybe for some reason you got distracted and you didn't eat. And so now you have this acid that's going down in your stomach and you had an ulcer and then it gets worse. So you want to just have a bite to eat and then take one, okay? And see how you feel. And then with the next meal, you're going to add another betaine hydrochloride, okay? So now we're up to 2, but I would recommend taking it slowly after you swallow the second bite, okay? So we're going to gradually increase the amount of betaine hydrochloride, but kind of mix them in with your bites of food. And so each meal, you're actually adding 1 more betaine hydrochloride gradually until you get to a point where you feel a warm feeling in your stomach, which means you've took too much. So then you would just back off. You've taken 1 too many. So let's say, for example, you're up to 6, okay? And you feel this warm feeling in your stomach. Well, then your dosage is 5. Or when you feel the resolution of the acid reflux, okay? So, wow, I have no more indigestion or I have no more acid reflux when I took 3. Well, stick with 3. Then you would stay on that dosage for a period of time, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 months, and then you can stop taking it for a while to see if this problem has been corrected. Now, of course, in the meantime, you're hopefully eating healthily to actually balance out these other factors like iodine, potassium, sodium chloride, things like that, as well as not eating too frequently, right? You're on this intermittent fasting program. But typically, an average person's going to really need between 1 and 6. And when you take it, maybe you don't want to take the whole thing in a handful. You want to take 1 at a time as you eat through the meal. But I think this video is extremely important because if you start taking the wrong solution for the wrong problem, okay, you're just never going to get better. Now, there's another reason why you may have GERD, okay, or acid reflux, and it has to do with a lack of a certain nutrient that controls the valve of your stomach. And for that information, I put it up right here. Check it out.